All right, now let's welcome up Troy Segali for tonight's message.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so let's just read the key verse really quick, and then I'll pray and we can start. So the key verse is 12:2. Let's read this together. Let's go. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. And I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. Can they pray? Lord, thank you so much for this passage. Thank you for all that you've done to provide a way for us to be a blessing. Please speak to all of us very powerfully through your word tonight. Give us ears to hear and hearts to understand. And please use me as your mouthpiece and bless us with your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so as you all know by now, I think, we're at the final day of the Genesis Good News Conference. And we've been doing this since Wednesday. And when Augustine named it the Genesis Good News Conference, I thought that was kind of odd, personally. Like he kept saying the Genesis, like instead of just the Genesis Conference or something, it's the Genesis Good News Conference. And so I kept thinking, why did he call it that? But when I was, so I'm one of three messengers, right? And as we were rehearsing our messages, like we're kind of going through them together, through various drafts, it kind of clicked for me why this is called that. So what happened was, to be honest, the first time everyone shared their message, they were kind of clunky, and the good news wasn't really there, and like the points weren't really coming out of the passages. However, one of the directions that we were kind of given was don't just do the passage, but try to map your life testimony to the passage and then share that while you're delivering. And I realized that when we started to do that in the second drafts, and I started to see everyone's life testimonies, it really popped out. Like it became very blatantly obvious what each passage was really talking to. And so I want to kind of throw that out to you guys. Like this really reminded me that when we read the Bible, we really need to put ourselves into the passage and apply it to ourselves as we're going through it. So like, for example, we read in Genesis 3 that Adam and Eve sinned, and all that happened with that. And we don't want to just read that as like a third-party observer and be like, well, I wouldn't have done that. Or, of course, they got in trouble, they sinned. We really want to put ourselves into the passage, and ask, like the main point of the Genesis 3 passage is God said to them, where are you, right? So we want to put ourselves in the passage, like God's saying to us, where are you? And it's like, oh, yeah. I am kind of distant from God. Like, where am I? What am I doing? And really, when the three of us found ourselves in the passages, we really found the good news, right? And it really unlocked the chapters for us. So if you weren't here the last 2 days, I'm going to summarize really quick. So Frank was the first messenger. And what was Frank's good news from Genesis 1? God created all creation and all people with care, attention, and purpose. And the world in our lives may seem chaotic or out of control or without purpose, but in reality, God is in control, and he can bring order and purpose to our lives when we let him rule over our lives as our creator and designer. And Frank's message, again, really came together when he applied that to himself. Frank's life was chaotic and on a path of destruction, but when he met God, he really did a 180, and his life changed, and he had order and purpose, and his life was really restored. Day 2-1 did Genesis 3, as I just mentioned, with Adam and Eve, where they sinned and they fell short. And we saw that even though when we sin and fall short, we may even hide from God, God is still seeking us out and asking, where are you? He wants to find us and reestablish a close relationship with us as his children. And again, Juan's message really came together when he shared his life testimony that he saw that he was lost and God sought him out even in his lost life and found him and grabbed him. He explained how 3 times people approached him on campus to ask for a Bible study. And so you can see that God's trying to reach him and trying to get him. He's trying to find him, right? I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Where's Waldo, but Uh, this is comforting to me, right? We get lost in the crowd. We think we're like God's over there and we're gone, but God finds us, right? And he wants to close the distance and bring us close to him, and he's looking for us. And these concepts really come to a head in today's passage. So those are both big picture, right? Like the creation of the world, Adam and Eve, that's like big picture, right? But we're over here. Today's passage is really zoomed in on one single person, Abraham or Abram. And this is a really good archetype for us, right? Because we're just like Abraham, we're this one person that God is trying to reach out to. So again, as we're going through this, look and see what God does to Abraham, but put yourself in the passage too and see how it lines up. So today's passage, the good news is God reaches out to us and communicates to us, and he gives us a very clear message and a purpose, right? And what's the purpose? You will be a blessing. So that's the main thing, but that alone is a lot to unpack, and it took me the bulk of my preparation time just figuring out what does it even mean to be blessed or be a blessing, because that's very vague, right? I think if you ask a lot of people what it means to be blessed, you might get a bunch of different answers. But what helped me really grasp the meaning of what it means to be a blessing or what it means to be blessed was when I looked at this from God's perspective, again, looking down on creation, looking down on man, looking down on Abraham. From God's perspective, what does it mean to be a blessing, or what does it mean to be blessed? And I think this is really important. We need to get out of ourselves and look at things from God's point of view, because he sees things very differently than we do, right? We're in our own thoughts. We're very usually self-centered, kind of looking at our own interests. But his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, his ways higher than our ways. And again, I really caught myself on here, like my definition of a blessing was way off, right? So here's the Webster's Dictionary of blessed. This is like the common world definition, which is basically blessed is a synonym for prosperous. So we have enjoying happiness, pleasure, contentment, good fortune, right? Like those little icons, like I'm healthy, I'm rich. That's what the world thinks it means to be blessed. And God could give you those things, like that could totally happen, but that's not what God means by I'm going to bless you, I'm going to make you a blessing. So that's really what we're going to look at today, is not what we think of this, but what God thinks of what it means to be a blessing. So the focus is we're going to answer these two questions by the end. So if you don't know the answer to these two when I'm done, come see me afterwards and we can talk about it. So first, what does it mean to be blessed? And then how can we be a blessing? Okay, so let's read these first 4 verses responsively. I'll go first. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in all the families of the earth you shall be blessed." All right, so we're introduced in today's passage to a guy named Abram. It doesn't really say much about him here, except that he's 75 years old. And that's actually pretty important to note here. So put a pin in that, and we're going to come back to that in a second. So right now we just know we have this guy Abram, and he's 75 years old. So rewinding a chapter to Genesis 11, let me read these really quick. This kind of explains more about Abram and his life. So it's talking about the generations of Terah, that's Abram's dad. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran died, and they lived in the land of Ur of the Chaldeans. So does anyone know the land of Ur of the Chaldeans? You can raise your hand if you know of that place. So the land of the Chaldeans is basically Babylon. Like the Chaldeans and Babylon is the same country. You guys all heard of Babylon, I'm assuming, or most of you. So Babylon was basically the richest, largest, most prosperous kingdom in the world. Even today in 2022, Babylon's regarded as like really, really high, like more prominent and extravagant than Rome, Egypt, pretty much any other country, Babylon was like the kingdom. And even in the Bible uses Babylon as like the template of the world kingdom, like the big kingdom. So Abraham's in Babylon. So he grew up in Babylon. That's where his father's house is. That's where all of his friends and family are. So now we got two pieces. He's 75 years old and he lives in Babylon. Okay. And then also from chapter 11, it says, Abram and his brother Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And then we see here in verse 30, Sarai was barren and she had no child. Okay, so Abram and Sarai are about 75 years old. They live in Babylon, and it says that she has no child and she's barren, which means she can't have children. So you might read that and be like, all right, whatever. But in today's 2022 America, like our culture is kind of different. Like a lot of people don't want to ever have kids. That's pretty common. Birth control is common. Even abortion's common, right? But in the past and in other cultures, this was definitely not a good thing to not have kids. If you can't have kids, your family line stops, right? Your legacy's over, and you're dead, right? And it was even considered to be a curse to many people, is that you can't have children. So now we start to get a little bit more of a picture of Abram. He's 75 years old, Babylon, and no kids. So again, try to put yourself into his position. When they're 20 and they're in Babylon, they're like, all right, this is awesome. We're in the best kingdom in the world. We're blessed, right? Everything's going great. And then, 20-something rolls along and they haven't had kids yet, but, don't worry, we'll have kids later. We're still young. But then 30, and it's like, okay, let's just, it'll happen. And then 35, then 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, all the way to 75. And at this point, they've probably thrown in the towel and given up on the prospect of children. And they're probably pretty hopeless at this point, like, all right, I guess my life's over. So it's really important to kind of look at them from that angle, that their life's kind of over and there's nothing else next, right? So now let's go back to Genesis 12, today's passage. So when I personally kind of put this all together, and especially when I saw the line about how he's 75, it really kind of hit me. Because in my mind, when I think in the Bible about Abraham, he's like this hero in the Bible. He's like this famous guy. And I'm like, oh, he's 75 when he met God? Like, that seems pretty weird. Like, I thought he met God like younger and like kind of got going. But he's already like an old man. This concept of not having children being a curse, that's actually not just like a superstition. Because look at Genesis chapter 1. So at the very end of Genesis chapter 1, after God created everything, he created man as like the apex of his creation, and he made Adam and Eve, and he blessed them, saying, what does it say on the screen here? It says, be fruitful and multiply. So this is the one kind of blessing and command, that the main blessing that God gives to mankind. So again, if you're Abram and you know this, then this would imply that God did not bless him, right? Because he can't have kids and he's not being fruitful, he's not multiplying. So now the question is, were they cursed by God? So again, from the world's perspective, they're in Babylon. They may have had a pretty nice, decent life, but on the inside, when they're kind of looking at their own lives and auditing themselves, thinking about where they stand between them and God, things probably weren't looking too hot, and they're probably pretty depressed. And I can personally relate to this. So this is like an issue that I had growing up. So I actually grew up and was raised Christian. So I went to church from as long as I can remember. I believed in Jesus. And I thought that I was cool with Jesus, and I thought that I knew God because I went to church and I had all the info in my head. But it wasn't until later in life that I realized that I did not actually know God at all. Even though I was Christian, I spent many years of my life suffering from depression. And not just like gloomy, like there was a time when I used to sleep. Every time I went to sleep, I'd sleep for 20 to 24 hours a session. So I'm just like literally so depressed and hopeless that I'm just trying to stay unconscious for as long as I can, right? And then my practical life was I just wandered. I felt really empty and hopeless. But again, it didn't happen all at once. Like, I started out pretty good, I thought. I tried to succeed. I tried to become fruitful. When I was 15, I tested out of high school and went to college pretty early. So like that's a nice start. But all of a sudden I found that I was like 27 and my life wasn't really panning out. And I really felt like I was on a hamster wheel and just like walking and going in circles. I'd work really hard and try really hard, and I'd plan, I'd seek help from like counselors and stuff, and I just couldn't make progress in my life. Because again, I'm going to college all this time, but I'm not graduating. In my mind, I'm smart, but I don't have a good job. I'm working full-time for like a minimum wage at a grocery store, going to school part-time, no prospects. Like I suffered a lot with like loneliness, but I couldn't get a girlfriend. I couldn't get a wife. Because again, in my mind, I was like guaranteed, or I just assumed I'd have the American dream, right? 30 years old, married, kids, nice job, house. But kind of like Abram, time kept ticking away, and not only was this not happening, it was very clear that this was not going to happen or ever going to happen, and then I was powerless and couldn't change the situation. And just like Abraham, it's like, when I was like 20, I was like, oh, that's cool, I still got time, I'm still young, I'm only 20. I remember someone even challenging me, like, well, so when are you gonna graduate, like when are you gonna get a job? And I'm like, well, I'm still 23, and they're like, And then 25, 27, like I'm hitting these milestones, right? Like those of you that are a little bit older might not remember, but when you're younger and you hit 18, and then you hit 20, 25, like you're already like done, basically. If you don't have it together at that point. Like 30, now you're an adult, you're old, And so, and my friends were making fun of me too. Like, hey, so when are you gonna graduate? Like, are you gonna, what are you gonna do at the grocery store? Like, they're starting to make fun of me, right? And I'm like, oh man. And again, I was doing a pretty good job of like kind of consoling myself. Like, all right, something will happen. I'll get lucky. Like, things will change. And that message I'm trying to give to myself just wasn't it wasn't working anymore at a certain point. So again, like Abram, being 75, waiting in Babylon for things to magically get better, he was hopeless, and same with me, I was hopeless, and I kind of just gave up, and I was like, all right, I guess this just is what it is, and this is just what I'll do for the rest of my life. And again, I kind of felt cursed. Like I felt like I was in the twilight zone, and I was powerless to change. Okay, and this concept of a curse, I really want to kind of hammer this a few times, so bear with me. So Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve eat from the tree, God literally does curse them. It says right here in the red, cursed is the ground because of you. So this isn't just like a concept. And then after that, the next thing is God drove out man from the Garden of Eden, and it says at the east of the Garden of Eden. So they leave the presence of God, okay? They leave his peace and they get cursed from sin. So sin happens, then this happens. Happens again in Genesis 4 with Cain. Again, God uses the word curse. It says, now you are cursed from the ground when Cain sins. And when Cain sins, same effect. He went away from the presence of God east of Eden. So he's going even further away from the Garden of Eden, going east. And he's even specifically cursed to wander. Which is what my life was. I literally wandered. I remember I spent a lot of time just walking up and down the street, driving my car around, just wandering. Okay, so that's the premise, right? Abram and myself are potentially cursed and wandering and away from God, hopeless. All right, so that's the frame. And again, Abram really represents mankind. It's not that Abram was lame and everyone else on the planet was doing great. Like, this is the idea, is he's like the archetype of man. So mankind, Adam and Eve, Cain, Abram, many sinned and kind of got distanced from God and kind of got cursed and became kind of fruitless and were having a hard time. So that's what makes this interesting, is now, all of a sudden out of nowhere, because again, it doesn't say that Abram did anything spectacular up until this point. Suddenly the Lord appears to Abram and he gives him this message. So look at the blue. He says to Abram, I will bless you. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and through you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So again, like, where is this coming from? And who wants to count how many times the word bless appears up here? Someone want to yell out the number? Jen counted 4. I counted 5. So he doesn't just kind of say, Abram, you really need to kind of get it together. Let's talk about this. He just blesses him and blesses him and blesses him, right, in this communication. And again, what's also interesting to me is God didn't go and find a strapping young lad that was like muscular and had a lot of potential and, oh, this kid's special, I'm going to bless him. He chooses this couple that's just basically done, right? And they're hopeless. These are the people God chooses to bless. So how does God actually bless Abram? Because again, we're trying to figure out what does it mean to be blessed, right? So now we're getting this message that maybe Abram's cursed, but God's going to bless him. So what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be blessed? So the blessings actually here in the verses on the screen. I'm going to ask you guys, this is kind of hard, but see if you can guess the verse that contains the blessing. So remember, we just discussed how man is dwelling away from God, and they're dwelling in sin and the curse of death. So where's the blessing in the verses? Heather mouths something. 3. I will bless those who bless you. All the families of the earth will be blessed. 2. So I want to make the argument that it's 1. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. So this is the blessing. So check this out. So this is a map I found. So let me turn on like a pointer. You guys can you guys see that little red thing? So this is Ur. This whole area is Babylon, this whole region. This is Ur, and if you look at this black line here, this is the path that Abram traveled on when he followed God. And he leads him all the way over here to Shechem, which is basically Jerusalem. So he goes over here. So he goes from here all the way over to here. So what direction, this one someone does have to yell out, what direction is God leading Abram? I'll put an arrow on the screen. West, yeah. So he's leading them west. And again, I mentioned, I don't know if you caught it, in Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve get cursed, they go east. When Cain gets cursed, he goes east, but the main point is they're going away from God. Now, opposite direction. The blessing is that God is calling Abraham away from sin and death, back towards God, back towards the Garden of Eden. So again, we sin and we go away from God. We go into the world, into the kingdoms of the world, into Babylon. And there we kind of dwell in our own sin and death and wander. God, the blessing is God's getting us out. He's like saving us. Like think of Exodus, right, in Egypt. God pulls all of them out of Egypt through Moses. That's the blessing. He can get us out. So we're struggling, we're wandering, we're in sin, we're hopeless. God can get us out. And when we walk away from our cursed life and we follow God and we go back into his presence again and get closer to the Garden of Eden kind of experience again, what happens? Our emptiness gets replaced with fullness. Our meaningless gets replaced with purpose. Our fruitlessness with fruit, and the curse with a blessing, right? Many, many blessings even. So that's the blessing. When we walk away from the curse, we're blessed. Just from that alone, like getting out of that. Hey, you're not cursed anymore. It's like that alone is a blessing. Another area of a blessing is going towards God. That's a blessing, right? Like everyone in the world, even though atheists, even the people that don't want to believe in God, everyone would love to talk to God, right? If God was real, everyone would want to talk to God. What a blessing that we can actually go talk to God. So that's a blessing. God's talking to Abraham. He's saying, come closer to me, walk with me, come in my direction. Like imagine you go to like Disneyland and you meet some fancy guy and they're like, hey, come walk with me. You're like, oh, cool, I get to go with them. Like, that's a blessing to walk with God, to walk with the creator of the universe. It's a blessing to leave this like purposeless life. And it's also a blessing to be fruitful, which we're going to look at in just a second. And another thing that's interesting is that when this like giant kind of shift happens in the spiritual reality, it often manifests in our physical reality as well. So not always, but usually there's a correlation, and we actually see that very clearly with Abram. So before God, Abram's 75, fruitless, wants to have a child, right? So what happens after he goes on this journey with God and starts following him? So let me read these verses. This is like 10 chapters up in Genesis. It says, "The Lord visited Sarah, Abram's wife, as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, who Sarah bore him, Isaac." So they're actually at this point almost 100 years old. I think they're 99. Either they're 99 or they're exactly 100, and they give birth to a son because God blessed them. And I think this is why God chose that couple specifically. Because again, if he chose some strong, super smart dude, you could argue that, well, that guy did something. But it's very clear that Abraham and Sarah did not do this on their own. God called him, and God really did bless him, and it even manifests in his physical life as a showcase of what's happening in his spiritual life. But he didn't just have one son, so let's like skip ahead a little bit more. I don't know if you guys have read the Gospels, but hopefully you know who Jesus is at this point. So in the beginning of 2 of the Gospels, it actually gives Jesus' lineage. So this is from Luke. I'm not going to read all of this, but it says, "Jesus, being the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Matthat, the son of Levi, the son of Sana, the son of blah, 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 the son of Judah, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham." So God didn't just, again, bless Abraham a little bit, like, okay, you can have a son, enjoy with your like one son. He blesses him to actually give birth to the entire, in modern days, Jewish and Iran, I guess, like. So basically, if you're Iranian, you're a descendant of Abraham, and if you're Jewish, you're a descendant of Abraham. So he literally birthed all of those people, which is pretty crazy. So God really blessed him, right? Like that's a big blessing. That's a lot of kids. But most importantly of all, he didn't just have a lot of children. He had Jesus. God actually used him to bring forth the Savior of the world, Jesus, who was promised in Genesis 3 when Adam and Eve sinned. And he is how this line is fulfilled in all the families of the earth. In you, Abraham, all the families of the earth shall be blessed, because through him came Jesus. And as you know, Jesus is the Son of God. He's the Messiah. For God so loved the world, he gave his only son, Jesus, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Jesus does to us all of the things that we just talked about. If we believe in Jesus, our sins are forgiven, and we can leave and be saved from our death, and we can live forever in basically the Garden of Eden with God, and our presence with God can be restored. We get brought back to the Father. And this is how not only Abraham was a blessing, but again, this is how you will be a blessing too. Because again, it's not just Abraham, but us too, right? If I bring someone to Jesus, or if I explain Jesus to someone, I'm now being a blessing, right? So that's how we can be blessed, just like Abraham, by following God. And we can also not only be just a blessing in a vacuum, or be blessed in a vacuum, but we can even be a blessing to others, and then they can become blessed, and they can become blessings to others through this same concept. So again, like one call of action, one act of faith from Abraham had this cause and effect that blessed the entire world, and we could do the same thing. If we take this call of action, we can bless basically the whole world if we go out and share Jesus with others. And again, I see this in my life. So I talked about how Abraham was Abraham wasn't doing so hot, and then God came in and his life turned around, again, as a manifestation of what's happening in his spiritual life. And so, again, I think I met God when I was like 27 or 28, and I was making minimum wage, working at a grocery store. I did not graduate from college, no wife, no girlfriend, no prospects, and no indication or a hint that any of these things would ever improve or change in the future. My best bet was to play the lottery or something. And I summarized Frank and Juan's good news, right, for the last couple of days. So what's my good news from Genesis 12? My good news is that when I look back on my old life, I saw that, again, I was just like Abraham, and I was hopeless. But my good news is that just like Abraham, God called me also, very clearly, just like Abraham. And he gave me the same message. Leave the empty, hopeless way of life that you dwell in, like leave Babylon, and follow me to a new land that I will show you. That's number one. And then number two, when you do that by faith, you'll be a blessing. So these are the two things that I got that crystallized and actually did happen. So I'm on campus. So this is how this all happened. So, and again, I knew something was wrong because, like I said, I identified as being Christian and I believed in Jesus and stuff. But I was like, but if I'm Christian, then why am I not happy? Like, why am I not peaceful? I was like, isn't that supposed to happen? Like, oh, that's weird. But I didn't make the connection. And so I'm on campus and this guy walks up to me and asks me to do a Bible study. And so I'm like, okay, sure. And I read the Bible with him. And when I read the Bible with him, and I'm telling, because again, I'm telling him, I'm like, oh yeah, Christian, I'm Jesus. Like, I'm like you, we're good to go. And he's like, when he looked me in the eyes and he's like, when I look at other Christians, I see Jesus in them, but when I look at you, I don't see Jesus. And I immediately was like, yeah, what's up with that? Like, what? Like, why is that not happening? But long story short, that day we had a Bible study, and when we read the Bible, even though I had read the Bible before, I had multiple copies of the Bible, and I tried to study it, it really opened up, and God really spoke to me clearly, and it knocked out my sin issue, which was like lust and women and like a desire for that. That was my God, basically. And I had like a spiritual blockage, right? And by kind of reading that, it kind of knocked that out. And then when I walked away that same day, I really had like an event, like God's presence was just like on me. I was like, whoa, like I remember even talking about, again, like trying to figure out why I'm not living like the Christian life the way it says I should be. I'm like, how is it that like, that's so crazy how in the Old Testament, like Abraham's walking and talking with God and Moses is talking with God and walking with God. And I'm like, wow, those Old Testament guys really had it going on. Like things were different back then, right? I did not think it was actually possible to walk and talk with God. And I met God and again, it like blew my mind. I was like, whoa, you can actually talk to God and God's actually real. Like, and it just like rocked my world. And what's really cool is this wasn't just like a one-time like emotional event I had. That kept happening and I still walk and talk to God on a regular basis today. And so to me, that alone is like a huge blessing and that could have been enough. But again, God blessed me in many, many ways. So that was like 27, 28. Within a span of like a year, I think I graduated from college, got a job in my field, like a professional job that paid professional, like big boy money. And within 3 years, I got married to a lovely lady who's in the audience. You guys will see her in a bit. And even had 2 children. And as it would seem, this played out pretty well. My firstborn son's name is Isaac, and my wife's name is Sarah, which is weird. My name is not Abraham, though. My name is Troy. But everything really clicked into place. And again, I think it was just a manifestation of God's taking care of me, and he'll make sure that I'm not wandering and suffering from sin and death anymore, and I don't feel empty. And like even another thing too that I want to kind of share is like about hopelessness is I put a lot of my hope in and value in Like like some people choose, I want to be rich and then people will respect me, or I'll do this thing and then I'll feel satisfied with my life. My big thing was I was pursuing art. Like I want to be a writer, be a musician. And I spent all my time staying up late into 4 a.m., 5 a.m. writing, making music. I was like, this is this is as satisfying as it gets. And if I could really nail this, then I could die and feel like I did something with purpose and people will think I'm cool or something. And what's really great is when I met, because again, I'm worrying that I'm not going to be anything and I'm just gonna fizzle out and my life will have been nothing. And I'm hoping that will solve that. After I met God and I had this kind of relationship that I'm describing, that just was gone. I didn't care at all anymore. I stopped making music, not because I don't like music anymore. I just didn't care. The hope, putting my hope in that just fizzled away. Another thing I'm really blessed about is even so I don't have that many pictures like Candy. I had to go on Facebook to find a picture. So last night when I went up to get this picture, I found the top post on my Facebook page was my childhood friend posted this picture. He's at this festival, I guess, in Nepal, or I don't know where he is, but so what this building is, this is a tomb where they have monks buried or something, and they're doing this festival to honor the tomb. So literally live, I'm typing up how God blessed me and how I'm so thankful that I have life now and my life's better. Simultaneously, my childhood friends are basically being spending time worshiping literal dead things. This is a dead building that dead people are buried in, and they're literally just shooting fireworks at it and putting lights on it. This is how my friends how old am I now? 38. This is how my friends are spending their time, worshiping dead things. And I'm praising God and worshiping life, and I'm so thankful for that. And again, I really want to emphasize, I'm not special. Abraham was not special. The Bible really comes to life when you put yourselves in it. So I made a space there. You can put your name in that. So the idea is that we all read this and you say, now the Lord said to you guys, to Terry and Robert and Sarah, go from your country, from your old dead life to a new land that I will show you, and I will bless you and make you a blessing. So that's the message that we're all getting today, and that we've all probably already received multiple times and will continue to receive. So I also want to say the one thing we can really learn from Abraham, because it kind of seemed like this just happened to him, is to make a decision to listen to God. Andrew shared this in his testimony that he's going to listen to God. He kind of was like, hey guys, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to follow God. So again, Abraham gets this message that blah, 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 I'm going to make you a blessing and all this stuff. How did Abraham react to that? Did Abraham say, can you explain more, or let me think about it, or, oh, cool? He went. It just says he went. There's no thought process. There's no anything. The next line is Abraham went, right? That's really key, because we hear God talk to us a lot, but if we think about it, I'll chew on that for a little bit. We never act. It's really important that when you hear the word of God, when it hits you, that you act and you jump on it. And then the other thing that happens is in Genesis 1, we saw how God speaks and something happens. Let there be light, and there's light. Let the trees grow, and trees grow. Let the land separate from the waters, land separates from the waters. If God can just command creation with his word, you don't think he can help us too? So when the word hits us and tells us to do something, that enables us. So that gives us the same, we get the same creation activator power, or whatever you want to call it. That's how Abraham was actually able to do it. Abraham wasn't able to do it because he was special and he was super disciplined and he always did what people told him to do. He was able to do this because God activated him by saying the words to him, and the words went in, and he made the decision to listen to the words. So it's kind of two things, right? We always wonder, where am I? What's in my responsibility? What's in God's responsibility? God did the blessing first. God made the way first. God spoke first. It's out there. Jesus is out there for everybody. Technically, everyone in the world has the same message to be blessed, but it's on us to then listen and act. And then a little nuance I want to add to that too is it also says, as the Lord had told him. So Abraham didn't go and then go the fastest route that he thought was best, right? He could have tried to cut through the desert or something, or go a different way, or maybe he tried to bring his father with him or something. He went the way the Lord told him. This is also a really key point because I have seen this a lot where I think that people kind of have this clunky walk with God because they're trying to get the blessing and they see that and they see God, but they're still trying to hold on to their old life too. So like, all right, God, give me the blessing, but I'm going to kind of stay around Babylon. Like I'll move a little bit, but not that far. And that's going to make the journey a lot longer and clunky. So let's go as the Lord tells us to do it, the way he tells us to do it. Okay, so hopefully we answer these two questions, right? What does it mean to be blessed, to receive God's calling, walk with him out of our old life of sin and into a new life? How can we be a blessing to bring this same message of salvation through Jesus to others? And then I'm almost done. I know we're kind of running a little bit late today, but there's a last thing that kind of came to me that I really want to share. What's going to happen next? Okay, so let me go through these really quick. Abram took Sarah's wife and Lot, his brother's son, and they went to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. From there he moved to the hill country, he built an altar of the Lord there, where he appeared to him. Then he moved again, and there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. I really want to point this part out too. This is also a very important key. What happens after Abram follows God and makes a decision to go on this journey and to leave his old life behind? Verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram. The Lord appears to him again. That's very important. I've met so many Christians, and I'm like, oh, you're Christian too? And I ask them to share their testimony. They share their testimony, and like they cry. I cry. They have this beautiful story about how they met God, and then they keep talking, and they're like, yeah, and I really need to go back to church, and like I need to read my Bible and stuff. And I'm like, oh, like they have this amazing moment, and then it like trailed off somewhere, and then they wandered away and got lost again. If we walk with God, we'll keep meeting God again and again. He meets him 2 times here. The Lord appeared to him in verse 7, and then in verse 8, it says he calls upon the name of the Lord. He builds an altar in verse 7, and then builds another altar in verse 8. So I want to point this out again is like what's going to happen next. We really are supposed to be meeting God again and again. It's not just a one and done, like, oh yeah, I met God like a long time ago. And I remember what that was like. We're supposed to keep meeting him. We're supposed to be walking with him and getting closer and closer and closer because the blessing keeps happening. It keeps going. And it keeps getting stronger too. So this is another last thing I want to point out. Verse 1, he says, hey, Abram, follow me, and what's going to happen is I'm going to take you to a land. I'm going to show you the land, right? That's the blessing. What's the next thing he says to him in verse 7? To your offspring, I will give this land. So at first, it's like a concept, like, oh, he's going to take you to some land. I wonder what that's like heaven, right? Like, oh, I wonder what's heaven like. Then as he follows him, as he continues to speak to God, he sees it. He sees the land, this land. So he actually steps on it, right? It goes from concept to like faith to a reality. It goes from fuzzy to clear. Our eyes see God clearer and clearer, and we see more and more of what he's going to give us. This is really key because if you only meet God once and you try to like get yourself to heaven, it's a hard jump. But if you're consistently seeing God more and more clearly, it's much easier to keep walking. So hopefully you guys are on board with all of that. And the other thing too that I like is just that it says he made an altar. So again, God speaks to him again and he acts again. He's making an altar. He's like putting a stake in the ground, right? He's like, I've been here with God. I've been here with God. So now when he's running back his life, he's seen all the places that he's been with God, all the victories that he's had with God in the promised land, right? It's not just this one-time thing that happened a long time ago. Because I have that testimony. I gave you my old testimony. I can give you a testimony for a month ago. I can give you a testimony for 2 months ago. I got a lot of beautiful altars to God in my head. Okay. So, again, I want to call you guys all to hear the word of the Lord and make a decision on the spot to do what he tells you to do. And open your ears because he desires us to come close to him. And he will help us. Even when we're struggling to hear him, he'll help us. So call out to God if you don't hear him, and he will call out to you as well. All right, so let's read the key verse together. Let's go. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great so that you'll be a blessing. All right, let me pray really quick and then close. Lord, thank you so much for these verses and for your word. Thank you that you've offered us this opportunity to know you and to speak to you, and that not only do we not need to live a cursed life of wandering and death and sin and sorrow, we can even live a blessed life. So please bless all of us in this room that we may know you and talk to you and to walk with you all the days of our life. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.